The 80 NATO troops, including 46 American service members killed in June, makes it the deadliest month in this nearly 9-year campaign.
You know, I worry a lot, but I worry about the survival of our troops over there who are getting killed. And I think this whole problem with McChrystal is the fact that the war's going so badly, and there's no signs of victory, no end in sight, and the people are dying, the money is going out the window, and I think this is just symbolism, and we're misdirecting it. I'd be much more energetic about talking about this if we talked about the failure of the policy and why our men are dying in a war that sees no end to it. That's where our real problem is, and the McChrystal argument is just symbolic of that.
Yeah, if you read that article in Rolling Stone magazine, which I read, I don't know if you read it, but it shows a very dire situation right now, almost a quagmire, no victory in sight.
We're eyeballs deep in Afghanistan for reasons people aren't quite clear as to why we're there. That's where the money is, that's where the people are, and that may not be where the problem is. Our soldiers their mission in Afghanistan is to try not to get killed, and you ask them why they're there or why people want to kill them, and they say it's because we're in Afghanistan and we're $6 billion a month for that problem. That's just stupid. To the Obama doctrine, President himself unveiling his new national security policy. The strategy also makes stopping homegrown extremists who were radicalized on U.S. soil a key part of the security policy. We're familiar with the recent events. Chris Steyerwalt, I'll begin with you once again. Sounds like certainly an interesting debate, but at the end of the day, for as much as he says he'd like to protect us here and invest here, we are currently spending $6 billion a month in Afghanistan and spending billions of dollars there effectively and spending pennies by comparison here. If that is his doctrine, how long do you think the American people have to wait to see it actually implemented?
Well, look, whatever President Bush called his doctrine, whatever President Obama calls his doctrine, the situation for the people of the United States right now is that we have 100,000 men and women under arms in Afghanistan fighting a war under very restrictive terms, fighting a war that is hugely expensive and is, as a matter of fact, the focus of our foreign policy.
6 coalition troops were killed today. That's 35 in the last week, making this one of the deadliest weeks of the war. And there are new questions tonight in Afghanistan over American taxpayer money and whether some of that money is landing in the hands of the Taliban. Huge convoys with supplies for U.S. troops there have to travel through dangerous parts of that country. And who gets paid to protect those convoys?
These are the men who protect the trucks. They're not American. They're not the Afghan army. They're a mercenary force hired by the trucking companies.
There's no ideology involved for them. This is all about taking the money that's brought over there from the taxpayer and making money off of it.
U.S. officials believe they are also paying off the Taliban in order to try and guarantee the truck's security. This trucking executive spoke to us on the condition we hide his identity.
Does your company knowingly pay militants in order to guarantee the truck's safety?
Our firm knowingly pays thieves to ensure the safety of our cargo.
The U.S. needs to send trucks through here, but the trucking companies have to spend $3,000 per truck just to get them through here. That's money that goes straight to the Taliban.
The trucking executive says he told the military what was going on.
What's their response?
There's nothing we can do.
The military says the delivery of every item troops need to fight the war must be guaranteed, no matter what. But critics say as long as the practice of funding the enemy continues, the war will never end. The congressional report found the military has, for years, known millions of dollars go to fund its enemy.
The big problem with our mission in Afghanistan right now is that we're trying to build a nation where none exists. And the second problem is that we're fighting people who are really irrelevant to us. The Afghan Taliban has nothing to do with Al-Qaeda. We're trying to kill people in Afghanistan who are fighting us largely because we're there.
The Obama administration in just the past week has awarded contracts worth nearly $250 million to the company formerly known as Blackwater. We told you Monday about the first $120 million of it, the State Department paying Z, that's XE, Blackwater's new name, to guard new U.S. consulates in Afghanistan. The Washington Post reporting today that the CIA just tossed Z another $100 million to guard its facilities in Afghanistan, and you don't want to know about its facilities in Afghanistan and elsewhere around the world. On Monday, the State Department testified that Z got the contract because other contractors were not qualified, and said yes, the State Department did take into account Z's past performance, including the 2000 2007 massacre of 17 Iraqi civilians by Z mercenaries, one of whom has pleaded guilty, 5 others still being pursued by prosecutors. 2008, hundreds of automatic weapons meant for Afghanistan police signed out for impermissible personal use by a Blackwater mercenary who signed his name, Eric Cartman. January 7th of this year, 2 Z mercenaries indicted for murdering Afghan civilians last year. March of this year, Senate Armed Services Committee reveals Z used a shell company to win other contracts in Afghanistan and made false statements to do so. April 16th of this year, 5 top Z officers indicted on weapons charges. So the CIA is hiring Z. Does Eric Prince have something on Leon Panetta or somebody in the agency, or how did this happen?
Well, you know, I don't think that he has his hands on a secret Leon Panetta sex tape or something, but what he does have is a 10-year record of participating in direct lethal actions, including the CIA assassination program, carrying out covert actions for the U.S. government around the world, many of which this administration doesn't want made public, the CIA doesn't want made public, and so Prince has been engaging in something called gray mail, where you essentially are nervous that they're going to come after you, so you basically say to them, I will show them where some of these bodies are buried, and I'll tell them who buried those bodies. So the Obama administration, I think, is playing a very high-stakes chess game right now with Blackwater. They cleaned up their act about as much as BP has cleaned up the Gulf. I mean, if by clean up their act you mean they changed their name and they put some new figureheads in charge of the company, yeah, their act is totally clean. But this is the same company whose top 5 deputies to Eric Prince, as you mentioned, were indicted on very serious charges. There are rumors that Prince himself may face some kind of indictment. And this is a company that continues to operate armed and dangerous, not just in Afghanistan, Keith. As we understand now, they're working for the CIA globally. So who knows what they're doing around the world right now on behalf of the U.S. government.
The Secretary of State, when she ran for the presidential nomination, opposed this kind of mercenary contracting. So did President Obama. We thought he did. What's going on relative to the leadership at the highest levels here?
Right. Well, I think that what this shows is that the United States has become entirely reliant upon these private sector forces. The fact is that we are now addicted as a nation to outsourcing national security policy. 70% of all personnel that work for the Department of Defense are now private contractors. I'm not just talking about the battlefield. I'm talking about the whole Department of Defense. So, you know, I've talked to a leading member of the Intelligence Committee today, Jan Schakowsky, who told me that she's repeatedly asked the Obama administration to justify this and has been given no clear reason for why they continue to do this.
If we're talking about covert ops, assassinations, other black bag jobs, and whatever else there is under the rocks, are there good companies that do this? I mean, is it an academic discussion of who's a good murder for hire operation and a bad murder for hire operation?
Well, I mean, if you review all of the companies and determine that Blackwater is your best company,
yes, okay,
then you know
point.
that this country is in serious trouble with its national security policy.
For some of those held at one of America's most remote prisons, the chances of seeing the inside of an American courtroom have dimmed. Friday's decision that 2 Yemenis and a Tunisian man can now challenge their detention is a victory for the Obama administration, which argues that U.S. courts have no jurisdiction over detainees held in a war zone. Human rights groups had hoped for a different outcome, especially after a 2008 ruling by the U.S. Supreme Court that detainees held at Guantanamo Bay in Cuba can challenge their imprisonment.
Well, we don't believe there's any significant difference between detainees held at Bagram and those held at Guantanamo. The detainees at Guantanamo have the right to a habeas corpus hearing, and in fact, in numerous cases, federal court judges have ordered detainees released.
That this base, unlike Guantanamo Bay, is in a war zone, and its temporary status means it cannot be considered sovereign U.S. territory. But the court making this ruling has had several of its decisions regarding detainees overturned by the Supreme Court, and lawyers say they will appeal. A case that was first argued by President George Bush's administration and then continued by President Barack Obama using the exact same arguments. The White House still hasn't responded to the case.
The council is working on a response to some of these points, and I'll get that as soon as I get out of here.
Critics say it sets a precedent for other overseas prisons to be operated with impunity.
We have heard allegations that there are other detention facilities throughout Afghanistan and at Bagram Air Base itself where detainees have reported very serious abuse. Without independent review by a federal judge, it's very difficult for anyone to ever find out the truth of these allegations.